Minister. Senator Frank Feighan.
Thank you, Laskin Carla. Thank you, Minister, for being with us today, and I'm glad to have this opportunity once again to highlight this issue, which has been and is an extremely important one for many rural communities. Certainly no one has ever denied that the turf cutting ban has been a very difficult one for all concerned. Despite this, I and many stakeholders were determined at the beginning of the last government to work long and hard to address, in a meaningful way, the challenges posed by the EU Habitats Directive for turf cutting communities, especially in SACs. At the height of this issue, I was the first politician to travel to Brussels to meet the relevant EU Commissioner in order to highlight the impact of the turf cutting ban on those affected. What did happen, it was absolutely unbelievable when we went with Conor Skehan and I remember Deputy Paul Connaughton and Martin Hayden, and I think it was Jimmy McLaren, the Councillor Jimmy McLaren from Galway, to meet the Commissioner, Mr. Pachacnik, and we said our government had just taken over. This was a very, very serious situation, the habitats. To which Conor Skehan said, there's been a 10-year derogation. All we want is another 6 months. And we were absolutely shocked when Mr. Pachacnik's officials turned around and said, what derogation? So the Fianna Fáil government decided that this was so explosive that they would tell the people, oh, the derogation continued to cut. And at the same time, the solicitors' letters effectively were coming from Europe telling us we were absolutely shocked. And indeed, Deputy O'Keefe admitted in the Dáil a few months later, he said, we thought there was a derogation, but we found out there wasn't. It was a shameful way to deal with probably the most important issue in rural Ireland at the time, and I'm glad that we dealt with it. As part of my campaign on behalf of rural communities, I was very glad to see that my call for the Independent Commission was listened to, and that a mediation process in the form of the Peatlands Council was established. I believe the Council, and setting up at the Peatlands Forum, allowed genuine views and concerns of the turf community to be taken on board in a formal matter. And all of this ultimately led to the setting up of a compensation and relocation scheme for turf cutters affected by the Habitat Directives. One of my primary objectives throughout the whole process was to make sure that those affected would be financially recompensed, and thankfully that did happen. In my own region, I fought for and helped deliver compensation for more than 1,000 turf cutting families. That equates to 23,000 tax-free to each turf cutter over a 15-year period. That is a huge amount in County Roscommon and East Galway and other areas. And there's other counties that don't have SSCs and they wish they were part of this compensation. I understand now it's going on for 4 years. It is also important to remember that the concerns of turf cutters wishing to relocate to other bogs were duly recognised by the Department, and these turf cutters receive a one-off payment of 500. The turf cutters of the 15, and they're also entitled to receive 15 tonnes of turf for each year until the relocation bog is ready to commence today. Turf cutting. Today I would like to take this opportunity to ask you, Minister, for an up-to-date appraisal of both the turf cutters compensation scheme and the related bog relocation scheme, the latter being a more complex issue, as we will all acknowledge. These schemes have certainly helped recognise the genuine concerns of affected communities who have been carrying out this turf cutting tradition for generations. To conclude, I would like to pay tribute to all the stakeholders, particularly the turf cutting community, who understood that the last government was forced to deal with a very difficult legacy issue, but at the same time, I believe, did practical solutions for those affected.
Thank you very much, Senator. Minister.
Gormagat, Cahirlook. I'd like to thank Senator Feighan putting down this commencement matter, and I'm taking this on behalf of my colleague Minister Heather Humphreys. I'd like to commend Senator Feighan for his work in relation to the turf cutting compensation scheme and the relocation scheme over the last number of years, and to acknowledge, I think, the work of the last government in sorting out a mess that has been left behind. And there was a debate last night in the Dáil where similar sentiments were being made by the opposition that the last government actually tackled something that had been left unsorted for a number of years. Since 2011, huge efforts have been made to solve the issue of the protection of Ireland's raised bog special areas of conservation within the framework of the EU Habitats Directive. This has included intense and ongoing engagement with turf cutting interests, farmers, non-governmental organisations and the European Commission. In addition, a long-term compensation scheme has been introduced to compensate turf cutters for their loss arising from the cessation. This cessation of turf cutting compensation scheme is comprised of a payment of €1,500 per annum, index-linked for 15 years, or relocation, where feasible, to a non-designated bog, together with a once-off incentive payment of €500. Over 3,200 applications have been received, and the total expenditure under the scheme amounts to in the region of €19 million. 11,086 annual payments, 1,649 once-off incentive payments of €500 and 896 deliveries of turf have been made in respect of these applications. The review of Raised Bog Natural Heritage Area Network, published in January 2014, concluded that Ireland could more effectively achieve conservation of threatened raised bog habitat through focused protection and restoration of a reconfigured network. The Wildlife Amendment Bill 2016 has been presented to Dáil Éireann and published. Its purpose is to provide for the implementation of a reconfiguration of the Natural Heritage Area Network arising from the 2014 review. The cessation of turf cutting compensation scheme has been extended to landowners and turbary rights holders affected by the proposals arising from the Natural Heritage Area Review. 246 applications have been received under the scheme and 342 annual payments have been made at a cost of just over €525,000 to applicants from these sites. 13 once-off incentive payments have also been made in respect of these sites. Details in relation to the cessation of turf cutting compensation scheme for each raised bog site are available on the website of the National Parks and Wildlife Service of my department. The county or counties to which each bog is located is also shown. I am making available to the House a table illustrating the amount of compensation paid under the scheme on a county-by-county basis. 633 applications to the cessation of turf cutting compensation scheme have expressed an interest in relocation to a non-designated bog. My department has written to over 400 turf cutters seeking expressions of interest in relocation to specific non-designated sites. The relocation of turf cutters is a complex process. Notwithstanding the complexity involved, 62 turf cutters have been accommodated on non-designated bogs in County Offaly and in County Galway. For a number of special areas of conservation, the relocation site identified may not be suitable or may not have the capacity to cater for the number of turf cutters who may wish to relocate there. In such cases, my department, in consultation with turf cutting interests, is considering the available options in terms of relocation and the provision of Article 6 of the Habitats Directive. The National Raised Bog SAC Management Plan will set out how the raised bog special areas of conservation are to be managed into the future and how the needs of turf cutters are to be addressed. The measures to address these needs include financial compensation, relocation to non-designated bogs and considering the possible utilisation of the provisions of Article 6 of the Habitats Directive. There has been a significant reduction in turf cutting activity on the 53 raised bog areas of conservation since the cessation of turf cutting has come into effect at these sites. Final resolution of all issues in relation to the protection of Ireland's protected raised bogs will only be brought about by everyone working together within the law, with my department and with the Peatlands Council, which was established for the purpose of ensuring the input from all stakeholders. And Senator Feighan, there is a table there which highlights the amounts paid to different counties. Now, there is some overlap. Some bogs overlap more than one county, and the table reflects that. So we'll see there are payments of $22,815,000 to Roscommon, further payments between Galway and Roscommon of $695,000, Longford Roscommon $17,000, Mayo Roscommon Sligo $220,000, Roscommon Longford Westmeath €2,536,000, and at sum total there of €19,881,602.35.
Thank you, Minister. Senator?
Thank you, Minister. The sums involved are absolutely staggering, and I'd like to thank the Government for making these sums available. When I look at Roscommon in 4 years, over $3 million has been paid. Nearly $5 million has been paid in County Roscommon in 4 years, and that's another 11 years to go. So please, please, I'm sick and tired, people out there, what about the turf cutters? And I'm so happy that we delivered for them. But there are people, politicians out there, and they said from the very beginning, oh, nobody will apply. 5 years ago, we said 1,000 people applied. Then they said, oh, there'll be no money. We said the money's ring-fence. This is absolute proof that this government has actually dealt in the best it could in a very difficult situation. And I'm so happy that I think it should be highlighted that this money is going into 1,000 families in County Roscommon and Galway every year. and there's another 11 years to go. And most of those families, thankfully, have a second bog, an NHA where they can continue to cut turf. And I'd like to say this is something that needs to be highlighted. It's good news, and once again, this government have put their money where their mouth is. Thank you.
God, you will, Senator. Minister.
Thank you. I'd like to concur with what you've stated, Senator, and commend yourself for the work that you've done over the last 5 years on achieving this settlement on behalf of turf cutters in the Roscommon-Galway area and across the country indeed, and also other people like our former colleague Paul Connaughton, who put a lot of work as well, and as I said, travelled to Brussels to meet the Commissioner. The details are, there are possibly more than a lot of people would have anticipated. 19,881,000 is a significant amount of money going into rural communities in lieu of the cessation. And, as you said, they show and demonstrate the commitment of government to those affected by the cessation of turf cutting on the raised bog conservation areas. The majority of those who were active on these sites are availing of the scheme. Engagement with turf cutting interests continues with a view to resolving the issues raised relating to the raised bog special areas of conservation. And as I said, the National Raised Bog Conservation Management Plan was developed arising from a motion in Dáil Éireann in March 2012 and supported by the Dáil. And this is in line with the programme for a partnership government, which outlines that the government recognises that domestic turf cutters have a traditional right to cut turf, a right which is balanced with the conservation objectives and legal obligations on the state. And I would again state that, having inherited a mess economically and financially in the country, we also inherited a mess in 2011 in relation to bogs, in relation to what had not been done, and we grasped that under difficult circumstances, and we achieved a result. There's more to go, and as I said, there is a bill presently being debated in the Dáil, which will come before the Seanad in time, in relation to completing putting closure to the issues in relation to turf cutting. And I'd like to again commend Senator Feighan for his work on this issue over the last number of years.
Thank you, Minister, and thank you, Senator.